Good morning. Rehab and Social Services will come to order. I will ask the clerk to open the roll. All those present, please vote aye.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to make a brief announcement. We do have a new clerk for this session, Sean Socko. Sean, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your support. David May is here as our usual DLS drafter. Hobie Lehman is here, who is in charge of sort of the nuts and bolts of our committee operations. And Ophelia, thank you for joining us, and I'm sure you're the one that does all the work. So, thank you. Few housekeeping matters. The first bill listed on our docket is Senate Bill 1104. And actually, Senator DeSteff's bill, Senate Bill 1293, is similar, touches on the same subject. Senator DeSteff has agreed to have his rolled into Senate Bill 1104. I believe I need a motion to do that, and that does require a vote on the board. Second. Thank you. Will the clerk open the roll? Okay.
12 ayes, 0 nays.
Senate Bill 1293 is now in with Senate Bill 1104, and they're both chief co-patrons. And we have a similar action to take. Senate Bill 1388 is exactly alike as Senate Bill 1299. So I need a motion to roll Senate Bill 1388, the patron is Senator Reeves, into Senate Bill 1299, the patron is Senator Bells.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Will the clerk open the roll?
12 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you. Okay, Senate Bill 1388 is in Senate Bill 1299 now, and we have two chief co-patrons, Senator Bell and Senator Reeves. We will make an effort to take the bills in the order in which they appear on the agenda, but we will have to be flexible because many patrons are at multiple meetings and they'll come to us when they can. Do I have any patrons in the queue? Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Senator Reeves to explain Senator Bell's bill and Senator Reeves' bill, the one that we just did the roll in, if you would, and then we can take a vote on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it okay to present the bill from here rather than the lectern?
You may present the bill from there.
Madam Chair, as many of us know, and especially those of us on the subcommittee, under COVID, we've run into some very challenging times, especially with our restaurateurs and food and beverage industry. And under the ABC guidelines and the regulatory authority we've allowed them to have, one of the things that we wanted to do was allow our establishments the opportunity to serve drinks that could be taken in a sealed container off premises. That wound up being very, very beneficial to our business owners to allow them, some restaurants, to even remain open as these restrictions have hit them pretty hard with regard to gathering. So this is just a bill that's going to codify those regulations that ABC had put into place, and we're going to make it continuous. So if you address down to line 500 of the actual bill, it says off-premises consumption there on it italicized, and then on 499 it talks about for on-premises consumption. So, Madam Chairman, that's kind of the summary of the bill, and if anybody has any specifics that they want to go through, I know David helped draft this up to make sure it was straight, so that would be the bill, and I'd ask that it pass.
Thank you, Senator Reeves. Do I have any speakers in the queue from the public?
Eric Terry, are you prepared to speak?
Yes, while we're figuring out how to let the public into our queue. I'm happy to take a question from one of our colleagues, Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Bryce, how long have we been doing this now pursuant to the governor's executive order that allows the same
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I think it was about a week or two after is when ABC came down and came out with these recommendations. I have personally spoken to a lot of business owners, not just in Richmond, but down in Tidewater area in Northern Virginia. And I've spoken to a lot of the associations that deal with this, these kind of restaurants and establishments. And literally they've told me that if it wasn't for this, they would be closing their doors. So it's been very productive. We haven't heard of a lot of incidences with regard to violations or increase in drunk driving or any of those things, to my knowledge, unless somebody else knows. I think it's been very, very successful for us.
Senator Morrissey.
Thank you. Senator Reeves, with regard to this bill, it's not just the delivery of the cocktail to the consumer's home, for example, but it also allows the consumer to pick up at the door the cocktail. Is that right?
Madam Chairman, my response would be yes.
Final question, Madam Chair.
Senator Morrissey.
Can you just explain to the members the packaging you referred to sealed earlier? Do you know how that cocktail is sealed?
Madam Chair, my response would be in a some type of cup or mug or anything with a lid that's on it, and typically there's a piece of tape or some kind of like anti-tamper that's put over that. I don't know if they're still using styrofoam because I know we were looking at banning that. So some type of plastic or paper or styrofoam cup that would do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there further questions from the committee?
Madam Chair.
Senator McDougal?
Ma'am.
Who else had a question?
I think it was, Madam Chairman, thank you. I think because many of us have had the opportunity to have some conversations about this over the summer, particularly during the pandemic, it has been important to a number of businesses. I was candidly, through some of those conversations, maybe a little wavering of how I was going to vote. I am going to vote to support this today, but I do want to, following up on Senator Morrissey's question, express as we go forward, this is very limited and focused during a particular time, but I do have concerns about where it could go if it was to be expanded outside of this limited and focused direction. So I think that this is important to make sure that businesses can continue to stay viable. Our restaurants, which have been one of the most hammered industries around, but as we go forward, we need to be very careful about expanding this. So, Madam Chairman, I'm going to make a motion to report, and understanding you have a lot of other people to hear from before, but I wanted to go ahead and do that.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made to report. I will take a second, and then we will take public comment to discuss the motion. Second was from Senator Mason.
Madam Chair.
Okay, now, have we, Senator DeStef?
Madam Chair, two things, if I may. One question, one a point of clarification. For Senator Morrissey, the point of clarification is on line 1352. It goes into the details of how the containers are going to be secured, et cetera. And that goes through, and how the board can revoke a license,
Yes.
which goes through 1362. Madam Chair, my question and concern, and it's not something, I'm going to support the bill. I believe strongly in it. It goes into more of a policy issue of, as you're delivering it around like line 1350, we talk about mixed beverage restaurant, limited mixed beverage restaurant license shall serve at least one meal with every 2 mixed beverages sold off premise. The way our M-bar system is set up, Madam Chair, you can't distinguish or determine the difference between whether it's on-site or off-site or on-premise or off-premise. So the policy decision we have to have and the discussion we need to have is how are we going to make this work with regards to the M-Bar. And again, it's not something I'm supporting this bill, fully in support of it. It's something that this committee is going to have a discussion or debate on a little bit later down the road.
I would concur with you. We do have to have that conversation, and thank you, Senator DeSteph, for bringing that up.
Madam Chair, Surville.
Senator Servell,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking to the motion.
speak to the motion.
So first of all, it would be good to hear from ABC just to confirm. Normally, if we were in a non-pandemic mode, we'd be able to just make sure they're cool with this. And I guess that might come up here in a second. But the second thing is, I'm pretty sure the way this is set up, and Senator McDougal, correct me if I'm wrong, but, and the questions that Senator Morrissey was getting at with Senator Reeves about how these things are being delivered in the container they're being provided. I'm pretty sure that if a police officer was to come across somebody with one of these containers with a top on it in a car, in a container that doesn't have any label on it that says it has alcohol in it, there'd basically be no way to prosecute somebody for either possessing alcohol illegally or in a car, because the presumption that's in the code only applies if the container is sealed and has to state on the container it has alcohol in it. And there's no requirement in this bill that the containers that these things are sold in state there's alcohol in them or that they are sealed. It only says they have to have a top on them. So I just want to point out that we might be setting up some enforcement difficulties when people are sold these items, but I guess that's a policy decision we're making. And I mean, maybe the ABC didn't catch that when they promulgated their regulations, if this is identical to the regulations, but I would just be curious to hear if ABC has any concerns about that.
Madam Chairman.
C is actually in the queue, and I think it might be worth our while to listen to hear from ABC and then take some public comment. Colleagues, I will come back to you. Just remember, this is time limited, and it is as much an effort to help our small businesses in this very difficult and challenging economic time. Is Travis Hill available to speak?
I am here, Madam Chair, if you can hear me, as is the rest of the ABC team.
Welcome.
Would you like me to address Senator Serval's question, Madam Chair?
Yes, please respond to Senator Serval's question, if you will.
Sure, and I can get our Chief of Enforcement up to dive a little bit deeper if you'd like. I think what he's referring to in the code is the presumption that if it's in a sealed container and it says Budweiser or something like that, it is prima facie evidence that it does contain alcohol. In a case like this, we can analogize it to an underage buyer case where someone comes in and the underage attempts to make a purchase and they open that container or they mix that drink. We would have that product tested. So I think in this case, if you were to prosecute a case, you would need to take the liquid from that cup and have it analyzed for its alcohol content. So
the conclusion is your enforcement mechanism is still in place. This in fact has been going on during the pandemic, so we're expanding this. We're expanding the time with which this practice will be permitted. But we are currently, this is articulating the practice as we now see it in our day-to-day lives. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Madam Chair, question for ABC, Serval.
Senator Serval.
Thank you, and good to see you, Travis, and sorry you're not here with us, but I've been practicing law for 24 years now. I have never seen a law enforcement officer ever test an alcoholic beverage for alcohol content. They test marijuana, cocaine, lots of other drugs. I've never seen anybody test alcohol. While I understand that might be the practice of ABC agents, I'm not sure it's the practice of any other law enforcement agency in Virginia. Are you aware of what the practice is of other law enforcement agencies in terms of testing?
Senator, I can't speak to the other practices of other law enforcement organizations in the Commonwealth. No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any speakers in the public queue? Yes, we're going to hear from the public, colleagues. Please call our first speaker.
David Skiles, are you prepared to speak?
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. David Skiles with the Vector Corporation, representing the Restaurant Association in Metropolitan Washington. I want to thank the committee for considering this legislation today. Obviously, as has been stated by Senator Reeves, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a deleterious impact on the restaurant industry. We have found that Cocktails to Go has been a lifeline through this pandemic, and obviously would like to see that continue as we continue to navigate the ongoing pandemic, and then of course the immediate aftermath once we exit this critical time. So we are supportive of the legislation. Obviously, we have worked with a number of stakeholders, and this bill, I think, reflects a consensus approach to temporarily extend this through June of 2022, while the ABC further studies of potential long-term regulatory framework. I appreciate the committee's consideration and available to answer any questions folks might have.
Thank you. Will the clerk please call another speaker? And I think before I have you call speakers, those who are in favor of the bill will ask to speak first. And if you can keep your comments to 2 minutes, that would be extraordinarily helpful and appreciated. Okay, there are no other speakers. There is a motion that's been seconded before the committee. There's no further discussion. I will ask that...
Madam Chair, just speaking to the motion briefly.
Yes, Senator McPike.
I have to slow down the train, but I just want to appreciate Senator Bell and Senator Reeves. They've been working on different ABCs with ABC subcommittee for some time. This is one of those important things to keep our small businesses and our restaurants going. And I think we've seen a lot of innovation. I think as a General Assembly, we need to continue to look at innovation that happened during COVID and during this pandemic and figure out what works. And I think this has worked well, and we'll support the motion. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Mason.
Senator Mason.
Real quick, I'd like to thank, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank the patrons as well, but I'd also like to commend ABC. They moved really quickly, they were flexible. This, as one of the speakers says, has been the #1 thing I've been contacted by my restaurants who have been devastated during this. ABC's done an outstanding job of being nimble and trying to help in any way they can. I appreciate the work that they've done. Thank you, ma'am.
I would have to second that. Okay, and remember, we are going to get a report. This is time limited to, for 1 year, commencing July 1st, 2021, and ending on the July 2022. So I'm looking forward to the report. I too think you've done great work, ABC. I'm going to ask the clerk to open the roll.
Ayes 14, noes 0.
Bill reports unanimously. It's one of the few bills that didn't have to go to finance. Okay. Do I have any patrons in the queue? If not, I will turn to Senator Mason because he has a bill on our docket.
Yes, ma'am. Well, that's an unfortunate segue, Madam Chairman, because I believe these do have to go to finance. The first will take Senate Bill 1312, if that's acceptable to you, ma'am.
Yes.
Senate Bill 1312 is an extension of a bill we passed last year to establish a Virginia Spirits Board. This board is working to promote the activities of research, education, and promotion of the alcohol distillery process and the spirits. We've got a vibrant distillery industry in Virginia. We're trying to do all we can to support it. This is the funding mechanism where they, just as all commodity boards, they charge themselves. They agree to $1 per liter maximum. It'll be phased depending on the size of the distillery. If you'll look at lines 40 through 53, it speaks to the collection, the reporting, the period of time that the reports have to be kept, and what happens if the amount isn't paid. So this is just the next step to fund the board that we approved last year, Madam Chairman. It has to go to finance because obviously the money will be sent to the tax commissioner, who will then fund the commodities board as they do them all. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator Mason. Are there any questions from committee members? Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Mason, did I might have misheard you. Did you say that prior to this legislation it was either voluntary or aspirational? Did I misunderstand you?
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, no, sir. Last year, we passed the structure and the mechanism to establish the Virginia Spirits Promotion Fund. This year, we had to come from behind it, and the industry has gotten together and decided what amount they want to charge themselves to fund the board. And they have set up a graduated scale. So heretofore, it has been no funding. Last year was step one, set it up. This year's come back with the industry saying, here's what we want to put the charge on ourselves in order to fund the board. So this is just a logical next step, Madam Chairman and Senator Morrissey.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues?
Madam Chair, Senator Reeves.
Senator Reeves.
So, Madam Chair, Senator Mason, if a distiller, which we know there are some that don't want to be part of it, do they have any recourse not to take part and not take part in the promotion fund, or just one size has to fit everyone?
Madam Chairman, Senator Reeves, I know there are members of the distilleries that we've had some issues with that are not a member of the consortium and of the group. But Senator Reeves, quite candidly, I do not know the answer to that question, and I should.
Madam Chair,
think
maybe
Reeves.
David May could help with that.
Mr. May.
Madam Chair, Senator Reeves, it doesn't matter if you want to participate. If you're a licensed distiller, you have to pay up to $1 per liter sold.
Okay, good questions. Any comments from the public? Anybody wishing to speak from the public? Okay, would you, and who is that one member?
Brittany Zamborski, are you prepared to speak?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes. Hi, Brittany.
Hi, Madam Chair, members of the
Welcome.
committee. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brittany Zamborski on behalf of the Virginia Distillers Association. To answer Senator Reeves' question, yes, if you are a licensed distiller within the Commonwealth, then you will have to pay an assessment that can either be passed on to the consumer, or if you choose to eat that cost yourself, you can. This was brought, as you remember, last year by the Virginia Distillers Association. We represent about 82% of the sales of craft distilled products within the Commonwealth. So we do have a few members who are members, but we are just hoping, because ABC, as we know, they are an authority, their charge is to produce revenues. Unfortunately, craft spirits only account for about 1% of sales within Virginia. So ABC focuses a lot of their ad space on the larger folks. So, Tito's, people that sell money, which is fine. We're just trying to have a separate avenue so we can promote our products within the Commonwealth. As you remember, about a year ago, we launched the Virginia Spirits Trail within Virginia to promote our products. We're just hoping this is, again, just another avenue that we can go down to bolster the industry within Virginia.
Thank you, Brittany. Okay, colleagues, we need a motion, and this bill does have to be re-referred to Finance.
I move to report and refer to Finance, Madam Chair.
Second. Senator Mason, seconded by Senator Boysko. Will the
Madam
clerk?
Chairman.
Yes, excuse me, before the clerk opens the roll. Senator Cosgrove.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I asked the patron. Now, this is only on distillers located in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Is that correct?
Chair, Senator Cosgrove, yes, sir.
All right. I have a little bit of a problem, putting that burden on Virginia companies if we don't have the same burden on, let's say, Kentucky companies. It just doesn't seem to be fair, to be honest with you. So, just a thought. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Senator DeStef.
Madam Chair, speaking to the bill, as we look at the concept of what we're doing, I believe that this puts an unfair advantage driving up the costs on Virginia distillers. So if you look across the country, vodka, for example, will be selling for one price in Kentucky and everywhere else, but if the distillery if they're in Kentucky or North Carolina, but if the distillery is located in Virginia, then they're going to be charged $1 a liter. So I think that you're setting an unfair advantage for distilleries and driving them out of the Commonwealth. And I don't think that's the intent of the patron. As a matter of fact, I know that wouldn't be the intent of the patron. And then secondly, if you look on line 44 of the bill, you've also added an additional burden of filling out a bunch of reports that have to go to the tax commissioner, reporting on all of this stuff so the commissioner can collect the revenue on this. So not only are you providing an unfair advantage or disadvantage to those who decide to create their business in the state of Virginia by adding an additional tax and fee to them, you're actually causing them to do additional reporting, which is even more burdensome on that business. And most of our distillers, in fact, are small businesses. And this burden, I just think, is a little too much, where it's going to drive some distillers to leave Virginia and open up in North Carolina, D.C., Maryland, Kentucky, Tennessee, other states. So that's my concern with this, Madam Chair. So I'll be voting against this.
Madam Chair, Servo. Thanks. Can I go?
Senator Servo,
Yeah, I have a question for the patron.
go ahead.
The Virginia Distillers Council represents all the distillers, just testified they support this bill, right?
Madam Chairman, Senator Serval, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Colleagues, are you ready to vote? A motion has been made and seconded to report the bill and re-refer it to Finance. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Ayes 8, nays 6.
The bill reports and is re-referred to Finance. Senator Mason, I believe you have another bill.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Madam Chair, we have Senate Bill 1328, which is a state-funded kinship guardian assistance plan. I would like to start with Mr. May, because we've had a couple of adjustments that will appear as a substitute, but they do not alter but a few points of the bill. But if we could have Mr. May report that, and then I'll explain the minor alterations associated with the sub. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Mr. May. Here we have some amendments.
Madam Chair, I'm going to hit the button now with your permission, Senator Mason. Go ahead and publish the substitute to the best of my ability here. Here's our first try at it. All right, so what I just did was click the button in the system. Supposedly you're able to see this substitute now on your iPad.
And could you explain to the committee members where they can find the language?
I think it should be in the same portal where you would normally access the bill, and if you're not seeing a link pop up there, you can also access it on LIS, where the public would look in the bill history.
If you hit LIS, the LIS button on your electronic bill book, it'll show you the bill history, and it should be under there.
Doesn't seem to be.
Nothing is popping up on mine.
Oh, wrong bill. How about that?
Are they technical amendments that can be read?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and start walking the committee through. They are pretty technical. One thing we did was we've got several instances in the bill where we refer to the Federal Kinship Guardianship Assistance Program, and in some of those instances we need to also refer to this new state program that we're creating. So that was some technical cleanup. So we added references to the new state program in the substitute on lines 239, 267, and 1080. The next thing we did was, if you look towards the end of the substitute, on line 1153, formerly, and what we're talking about here is eligibility of a child to participate in this state-funded program. Formerly, the standard in the original bill was that the placement of a child with this relative participating in the program was in the best interest of the child. We already have a standard that the court looks at when they're placing a child with a relative. It's a 4-pronged test. It's set out in 16.1-282.1. So rather than put a best interest standard here, which would be a slight deviation, we went ahead and took that out and just cross-referenced the four-prong test that a court would use when placing a child with a relative. And the final piece was purely technical. We just added section 16.1-228 to the bill to add in a reference to the program in the definition of foster care services so that we could match the definition that we put in 63.2-905. There's a lot of definitions that repeat in both titles, so this one was not in the bill originally, so we added it in just to keep everything consistent.
Okay, those really do sound very technical, and thank you for explaining them, and we need a motion.
Move the adoption of committee substitute.
Second. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Substitutes before us.
So I know it's frustrating to a committee if you've reviewed a bill to come and then completely change with the sub. That's not what just happened there. As Mr. May mentioned, that was very technical in the description along the way of the bill. And so I will direct your attention, depending upon which bill you're reviewing. The old line started at 945 and went to about 985. The new lines are 1140 and go to about 1180. And this bill passed out of the Senate last year 40-0, but along the way we went from a $75,000 fiscal impact to a $1.6 million fiscal impact, which I won't opine on. But the goal here is the federal kinship program is very restrictive. This is a chart that shows all the different ways that you can qualify for federal. The first chart is, are you a licensed foster parent of a child who is your relative? If no, you're out. So there are many circumstances that it's difficult for relatives and families to become licensed foster families. So again, depending upon where you're looking at the reviewing the bill between 945 and 990 or 1140 and 1180, you'll see the eligibility. And it speaks to the kinship guardian. The child is in foster care, has been in the custody of the local department for 90 days. And then the most important adjustment on 958 or 1153 was wording that the Office of the Executive Secretary asked us to review. And Mr. May just has referenced previously existing code rather than putting in something new. Because that was another big burden. As children under 14, it was almost impossible to transfer them to kinship care. And over 14, they can have a participatory role in this. But under 14, we're trying to get it. So you'll still see down in 975 or around 1160 that the requirements, background checks, eligibility. They have to put together a plan, a guardianship assistance agreement. So it's still very regimented. But Madam Chair and members of the committee, this is an attempt to get children that are in foster care and for whatever reason it's not working out to a kinship group or a fictive kin, which means not blood related but very close mentally and emotionally. And finally, Madam Chair, based on last year's DSS's fiscal impact statement, this has to go to finance. But what we've done this year is take their PowerPoint on this exact same bill, and they suggest that if you put 100 children in, it's $403,000 plus a $226,000 local match. So we've tacked some additional on, and we're asking for a $500,000 budget amendment. And what we're saying is that is going to cover 100 kids. If it gets to 100 kids between July 1 and June 30th, it stops, it's capped. But I probably have a better chance of edging out Trevor Lawrence for the #1 draft choice in the NFL as we do getting 100 kids in this program. I hope we do. I hope I come back next year and say I was wrong. But this is designed to take 1 year, get this program structured, get this program moving, get as many kids in the program as we can, then come back hopefully next year and in the biennium budget, put this program in place, fully funded to as many children as can take advantage of it. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Mason. I do think it's worth noting that Virginia is almost dead last in its ability to divert children who are either in the foster care program to family evictive kin or to prevent children from entering the foster care system. So this bill serves a very important purpose. Are there any questions from the committee?
Madam Chairman. McDougal.
Senator McDougal?
Madam Chairman, I think what you said and Senator Mason said, being able to help children, particularly at this age, is really important, and stepping up to do that. My question is, because we pretty much approved this bill last year, is more to what David May was talking about with the standard, best interest of the child versus the test. Can you go back through that, what the logic was about making that change?
Sure, Madam Chair, Senator McDougal. So the logic was that when a court is making this decision, and regardless of funding aside, when they're just determining whether the kid should be placed with this relative, whether it's safe and permanent enough to qualify, they're running a test under subsection A1 of 16.1-282.1, which is a 4-part test. You can find that language in the substitute on starting at line 265. That's the paragraph that starts the 4-part test, and basically the 4-part test is it's found by the court the relative is to be willing and qualified to receive and care for the child. They're willing to have a positive, continuous relationship with the child. They're committed to providing a permanent, suitable home for the child, and is willing and able to protect the child from abuse and neglect. So rather than use, all of these determinations are always subject to the best interest standard anyway. So in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that the language does anything, except for the fact that we want to make sure that this finding was done. It should always be done, but we want to make sure that it was done if you're going to get money from the state program.
Madam Chairman, so just help me with this. So what you just went through on those lines 269 through 276, that's existing code right now. And we're referencing it in the new lines in 1100 through somewhere? Is that?
That's correct, Madam Chair, Senator McDougal. That's correct.
Can you point that to me?
So lines 265 in the substitute, 265 to 276, that's the current law. And that's the current law for just making the determination of whether the child should be placed with the relative. So now we're just moving that over to cross-reference that to say, if you want to get money from the state through this program that's being created in the bill, we want to make sure that that standard was met, but it should always be met.
Madam Chairman, so where is that cross-reference? That's what I'm...
The cross-reference is on line...
1153?
1153, yeah.
Okay.
So 1155.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to move to report.
Thank you. Okay, a motion has been made to report and re-refer to finance. Is there a second? Second, and then I'll take comments.
Madam Chair, I have a question. Surville.
So,
Surville.
Surville was the second?
No, I have a question.
Okay.
There is a second. There's been like 3 seconds.
Did Senator Locke, did you do the second? Senator Locke is the seconder. Before I take public comment, Senator Surville.
Thanks. I have a question for council. So back in 2012 and 13, I had a knockdown drag out with Senator Barker, resulting in Governor McDonald's veto of a bill that had to do with temporary kinship care and admission into schools. And the concern at the time was that people might pretend that a child was in kinship care so they could get their kid into a different high school or a different elementary school if they didn't like the one they were in. And so section 22.1-3 talks about temporary kinship care as defined in 63.2100. And I don't see temporary kinship care as being a defined term in 63.1-200. And now that we're creating 2 definitions of kinship care, federal or state, under the federal or state program, I'm kind of wondering whether or not that reference might need to be modified so that it's clear that, first of all, I'm not even sure what temporary kinship care is, given it's not even defined in the code, even though it's referenced in 22.13. And secondly, it's just now that we're breaking it into 2, I'm kind of wondering whether that needs to be clarified as well.
Madam Chair, Senator Surville. Yeah, just looking at 63.2-100, we've got kinship there generally. I'm not sure what temporary kinship care is either. I'm guessing that it's more of the informal arrangement when there haven't been court hearings to designate this as a formal kinship guardianship, but the child has been placed with a relative, and I guess in some instances the local Department of Social Services is comfortable enough for them to be with a relative in the time being.
That's right.
So we did not, what we did here in altering our definitions was just to say, let's look at the program where they're getting money through whatever relationship they have. And since we're going to have two now, we just split it out because currently the definition for kinship guardianship assistance in the code is just referring to the federal. But now since we have a state and federal, we had to name that one federal and make a new one with the state. I did not seek to alter at all the rules surrounding kinship guardianship. This was simply, all of the amendments were targeted at making sure that funding was appropriate underneath the program. So none of the substantive rules for the kinship should have changed. So it would be up to Senator Mason. I'd be hesitant to changing the substantive rules just because I feel like we haven't done that in the bill. But I'll leave it up to the committee.
Madam Chair, I have another question.
Ravel.
So would it be accurate to say then that temporary kinship care is a situation where a child is placed with a family member while a proceeding to place the child either into the state kinship program or the federal kinship program is pending?
Madam Chair, Senator Servo, I think that would be one instance. It may be that the child has not been formally placed with the relative at all by a court, much less participating in the funding program. I don't know. I'm sure there are some other circumstances, though, where you could be in a temporary kinship arrangement. I would assume, I think that we have the folks from Family Services in the queue from the Department of Social Services, so I'm sure they could tell us the various.
I will ask if
Okay.
they're in the queue.
Thanks.
I will note that flexibility in these programs is very important because family situations are unique. Do we have Kristen Zager or the commissioner? Duke Storin is somebody from their team. Okay, would you please allow Ms. Rente to come into the, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So the children that we're talking about for the state-funded kinship program are children who are in foster care. And these children would not be temporarily placed with relatives. They have to be in approved placements as long as they're in foster care. So they might be placed with a relative who's approved as a foster parent, or as Senator Mason mentioned, sometimes there are relatives who come forward who are reluctant to go through the approval process, or time considerations prohibit them from going through, or because of the extensive barrier crimes lists that we have, sometimes an old criminal charge from 20, 25 years ago might prohibit them from being approved as foster parents. So there are lots of reasons why those families might not be eligible for the kinship guardianship program that we have now. But in no instances would the children who would be eligible for this program be placed in any kind of temporary kinship arrangement, because those would not be considered approved placements for kids in foster care.
I actually have a follow-up question. Will there be some agreement that would be required between the relative and the biological parents for this placement?
That is not specifically a requirement of either of the programs. For formal, these guardianship programs are an exit from foster care. So for children who are in care, we're trying to get to permanency. This is a mechanism for custody to be transferred to the relative with supports. As Senator Mason mentioned, there are some fairly restrictive requirements for the current kinship guardianship program that this program would change to make it a little bit more accessible for enough, for for other kids and families. At the point that the point that the child would be exiting foster care, a judge has to make a determination that return home is not in the child's best interest. And parents who are represented by attorneys would be part of that court process. So, I can't say for sure that the parents will always be 100% in agreement with that, but many times families are interested in making plans for their own children and may have encouraged relatives to become involved. Relatives are supporting the children to have appropriate visitation with families, to maintain those relationships, all of those kinds of things. So there's not a formal agreement that the parent enters into in this process, but parents are always involved in planning for permanency for children who are in the foster care system, and would certainly be aware and then also involved in the court hearing process.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from my colleagues? Hearing none, do we have any speakers in the queue that we should let in?
Are you prepared to speak? Allison Gilbraith, are you prepared to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Allison Gilbreth with Voices for Virginia's Children. I'm thankful for this fruitful conversation on making Virginia a kin-first state. We are strongly in support of this legislation. I also want to say all members of the Foster Care Unified Agenda are in support. I'll read some of the organizational names: Children's Home Society, DePaul, Greater Richmond SCAN, Families Forward, United Methodist Family Services, Virginia Kids Belong, Virginia Home for Boys and Girls Club, Hope Tree Families, Equality Virginia, See2Adopt, among others. Thank you for this time.
Thank you.
Valerie LaRue, are you ready to speak?
I am, yes, thank you. And thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you to Senator Mason. This is Valerie LaRue from Virginia Poverty Law Center. This committee has been looking at the issue of supporting families in these kinship arrangements for a few years now, and I think have really given a lot of attention to this issue. It is really important for children to be able to maintain their connection to their birth families, and this will help further that goal. Virginia is trying to move to what's known as a kin-first culture, and this will really help. And I really appreciate you, Senator Vovola, Senator Mason, and also Senator Reeves, who have been working on this issue for a while. We definitely support this bill, and thank you for bringing it.
Thank you. Appreciate your efforts. The next speaker.
Sandra Carrison, are you ready to speak?
Yes, good morning. Sandra Carrison, Office of the Executive Secretary at the Supreme Court of Virginia. The court does not have a position on the bill, but I would like to express that my appreciation to Senator Mason for working with us on the technical amendments that address the court process for the child that's in foster care who would exit to this fictive kin placement, and then the kinship guardianship to establish the eligibility criteria for the fictive, the kinship guardianship placement. And also David May, my appreciation there, and to express my willingness to respond to any questions that Madam Chair, you or the committee members may have regarding the court process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Okay, we have heard from those who wish to speak to this. There's a motion before us to report the bill and to re-refer it to finance. It's been seconded. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Ayes 14, noes 0.
That's great.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
The report to re-refers unanimously. Okay. What is, which patron do we have next? Okay, colleagues, let's turn to Senate Bill 1179, Senator Evans' bill. It's on private management of correctional institutions. Welcome, Senator Eben.
Thank you. There is a change to the bill. There's an amendment in the nature of a substitute, but it's not it's one substantive change, but it was done because it brings in another code section. I don't know if you want me to explain the change or if you want to adopt it first, or.
I think we need to adopt
Okay.
it first, if
Yeah.
you're okay with that.
If it's substantive, could we hear what the substance is? Because we may or may not like it.
Yes, I was, point well taken. I was expecting it would be explained before we adopted it, but yes, okay. Go ahead.
What the amendment in the nature of a substitute does is it repeals the authority for private management of regional jails. This comes at the request of the Sheriff's Association. There are no privately run regional jails now. They felt if we're going to make the policy change for the state prisons, that we should also make it for the regional jails. Those are the two bodies that are allowed to have private management now, even though they don't have regional jails. So by adopting the amendment in the nature of the substitute, we would just be adding in regional jails to be considered as the same policy for whatever the ultimate outcome of the bill is.
The substitute.
Yes.
Okay. Colleagues, an amendment in nature of the substitute is before us. May I have a motion to adopt it? Okay, motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor of adopting the substitute signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, the substitute's before us. Senator Eben?
Okay, so what this bill does, SB 1179, is it removes the authority of the Director of the Department of Corrections to enter into contracts with prison contractors for the operation of facilities. That would be the management, custody of inmates, and provision of security. And now it also includes the private regional jails, which there are none in Virginia, but it would prevent that. It does not affect the department's ability to enter into private contracts for other correctional services, including food service, medical care, transportation, sanitation, information systems, religious activities or recreational activities, financing, construction, and maintenance. It has a delayed enactment clause of 2023, I believe, to allow for time both to transition and for the current contract to run its course. The bill does not impact the private operation of halfway houses. Last year, Senator Chafin had brought that up as something he was concerned about, and that's a separate code section, 53.1-1. I want to point out a few things about the bill, though. It specifies in the enactment clause that the department would give priority to former employees of the Lawrenceville Correctional Center during any hiring process. I think this bill would be a plus for the economy of Brunswick County because it would require more employees to be brought on at the ratio that the Department of Corrections normally has employees, and they pay $5,000 more on average than the private operator. We currently have only one private prison or privately run prison, Lawrenceville, which is a medium security prison in Brunswick County, which houses 1555 male inmates under contract with a outside contractor that's operated since 1998. I want to stress that this bill does not close Lawrenceville. Lawrenceville is owned by the state, the brick and mortar facility. It wouldn't close it. It would transfer the management of the facility back to Department of Corrections. In order to lower operating costs, private prisons hire fewer employees and pay and train them less than the state and federally operated prisons. The employees receive 58 hours fewer training and earn an average of, as I said, $5,000 less than their government-employed counterparts. Lawrenceville's ratio of inmates to staff is 4.72 inmates per staff member, 40% higher than the Department of Corrections requirements for their own facilities. Last year, this committee had requested a study from Department of Corrections of how much it would cost to assume management of the prison. And we have that figure, and I put in a budget amendment for it. I should say that there are some problems with current management because there are critical staffing roles required under the contract that are consistently not met, leaving inmates without dental care, nurses, physicians, psychiatrists, and an appropriate number of corrections officials for extended periods. And as one example, an inmate could not access dental care while being held at Lawrenceville because the contractor did not have a dentist on staff. His temporary filling fell out, and for 6 months after constant and severe pain before eventually losing his tooth, solely because they did not provide him with basic dental care. And the low pay, obviously if you have a profit motive, you want to pay as little as you can get away with while still providing some staffing. There's an excess of $10 million in deferred maintenance work at the facility. In July of this year, water was cut off to inmates for 4 days in some units due to pipe leaks. I should say that there's ample evidence that despite cost-cutting measures, private prisons don't save money for the state. They often push down their costs by refusing to accept prisoners with severe illnesses or a history of violence, shifting the risk and cost to state institutions. Results from a comprehensive 2007 study by the University of Utah suggested that cost savings from privatizing prisons are not guaranteed and at best are minimal. I'll say that from the report, the cost is assumed to be $9.3 million per year to assume this facility management of it, and that's what my budget amendment is for. So this bill, I guess, would go to finance if reported. Yes. But even with this increase, the cost of operating Lawrenceville Correctional would be 12% less expensive than comparable Virginia facilities. And I'll say that we would, part of the reason for the increased cost is that the state would hire 93.25 full-time equivalents to address relief staffing needs, increase the number of relief staff, increase the salary, and increase benefits because state correctional officers do receive benefits. According to Department of Corrections report that you'd requested, the department would require up to 9 months to develop the staffing component required to operate the facility. And I'm going to just really briefly, if I might, Madam Chair, read 2 excerpts from letters of inmates' families at Lawrenceville. My father is 72 years and incarcerated at Lawrenceville. He contracted COVID-19. Just recently, he finally got another chest x-ray, and there's still white spots on his lungs, which no one will talk to him or myself about what that means. There are inmates that go months without medications they need, such as heart medication. That's from one family member. But the other I'll read says, he was informed he needed to have a yearly checkup due to his heart condition. Lawrenceville has failed to provide him required checkups or the proper care he deserves. His heart condition is progressive and can be fatal. He exhibits many symptoms of his condition, such as shortness of breath, dizziness, lower extremity swelling, chest tightness, numbing sensations, hands and seizures, in his hands and seizures. There have been many instances where his symptoms have caused additional medical attention to be required, to which Lawrenceville has neglected to provide adequate medical care, and they gave examples of concussions from hitting his head on the concrete floor, fractured wrist, broken ribs, stitches, and sprained ankles. Because of the blatant disregard of his medical needs, in April of this year he had a seizure and was hospitalized for 3 days. It's not until fairly recently, after one of my multiple complaints, that he was finally able to have an appointment with the cardiologist and able to have a cardiogram. Because of the indifference of Lawrenceville Correctional and the private contractor, his condition has gotten worse. So you have a policy question before you. We have people who the state has decided will lose their liberty through our court system. And the question is, do we have a responsibility to provide their care directly? And the buck has to stop with someone. Should it stop with the state, or should we try and cut corners and do it in the cheapest way possible with detrimental impacts? And that is the bill, Madam Chair. And as I said, it was endorsed by the Sheriff's Association, They say that privately run correctional facilities have a profit motive, and sheriffs believe that restricting someone's freedom should not be left to a profit-driven contract. Those responsible for providing basic public safety services should be as directly accountable to the people as possible. And that's from John Jones. I don't know if he was able to be here today, but he shared that with me.
Thank you, Senator Eben. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Morrissey.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Edmund, can you tell this committee with certainty that the regional jails and the Lawrenceville Correctional Center, if operated by DOC, would be better
Yes.
than if they were simply maintained by these private companies, and what empirical evidence do you have to show us that?
Well, the empirical evidence is that under Department of Correction standards, according to the report that this committee had requested last year, they indicated that they would have 93.25 full-time equivalents additional.
I'm sorry, what?
93 employees, additional employees would be hired. And also the facility has not met the Department of Corrections standards for dental care and at other times for some medical services.
Follow-up question.
Senator Morrissey.
You read a couple of excerpts from inmates, and I'll tell you at the onset of this question that the most important thing for me is that these inmates get proper care, medical, dental, psychological, etc. That's my focus. I will also preface it with this. During this pandemic, I was writing letters on a daily basis to wardens throughout the state, asking them to consider early release for such and such an inmate who had pre-existing conditions, who was in a pod with 5, 6, 7 other people who had COVID-19, and they were describing deplorable conditions. Deplorable. I can't tell you the number of letters that I wrote, but it was over 100. I'm curious where you get the evidence that it's, and I don't know the answer, that it's worse in Lawrenceville, or it's worse in Riverside Regional Jail, or it's worse in Orange County Regional Jail than in DOC, because I'm telling you, DOC was not coming out looking rosy from what I heard.
Right. Well, I think it's the more employees, staff that are available. I'm not here to evaluate the Department of Corrections as a whole, but the more staff you have, the more guards you have, the more, if you deprive, I mean, simple fact of depriving inmates of dental care, there was an article in the Richmond Times-Dispatch about this particular situation. This difference between having medical care and dental care and having adequate number of employees to deal with issues that arise makes a difference. I think there are some witnesses that may have signed up to testify who might have more information as well.
Follow-up question.
Morrissey.
I understand your bill, the gist of it is on page 5, and it's line 272, and what you are seeking to do is prevent the regional jail, which you've just added to the bill, as well as Lawrenceville Correctional Center, from hiring folk to manage the prison, manage the custody of inmates, and provide security, correct?
Right.
But you're not taking away the ability of that jail to do 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Am I right?
Right. Yeah.
Hold on. I just want to make sure I've got this.
Right.
Is it to deal strictly with medical services?
Well, the Department of Corrections, that's correct. The Department of Corrections, though, has a history, though, of providing medical services through whichever means that they do. Lawrenceville, they have a, I mean, if you're the CEO, are you going to pay more to get a dentist in there? There's a profit motive to cut costs.
Here's my point, Madam Chair.
Senator Morrissey.
You just said, in defense of this bill, that you questioned the medical services provided, the dental services provided.
That's right.
But this bill particularly allows them to contract out
Yeah, that would be fine.
for medical services and dental
That would be
services.
fine as long as they're provided just like the other prisons. I'm
Senator
saying
Evan,
that the current operator is not providing it.
Senator Morrissey, please put your comments.
There's
to the
only
chair.
Senator Evan, wait a second.
Where's your charger case?
Senator Evan, we're talking.
Senator Morrissey, please direct your comments to the chair. You have the floor.
May I ask the senator a question?
You may.
I think they might only be to the phone.
Senator Evan, I want to make sure that I'm not missing something because I could be. I am in agreement that the dental services and the medical that the dental services and medical services are lacking. I'm in agreement with you. Does your bill still allow DOC to contract out or farm out for those medical and dental services? Just a yes or no and then an explanation.
Madam Chair, as I said, yes, it does allow for it, as it's stated on line 273. Part of this is about accountability. And do we want the Department of Corrections to be accountable to provide medical services as they do in many other facilities? Or do we want to have a private contractor accountable for this who is not meeting the full mandate of their contract?
I think we understand your point, Senator Morrissey.
I'm making a couple others, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'd like you to move on to an additional point.
Thank you. Right now, some inmates that are in jail, in DOC and regional jails, that need a Tylenol pill have to pay $3 and $4 per pill, per pack for 2 pills at the canteen. Does your bill address that disgraceful practice?
Madam Chair, my bill doesn't deal with the pricing of medical services for aspirin. I'm not familiar with that.
We understand the bill. Senator Morrissey, I'm going to allow you one more question.
Well, it's actually, Madam Chair, it's really important. I know we spent a lot of time on the previous bills, so you may limit me to one question, but I'm trying to get at the crux of this bill and how it's going to impact 26,000 inmates. Let me ask you this. The cost, are you telling this panel that there is a cost savings or a cost increase by switching from regional jails to DOC? Can you tell us with specificity what it is? Cost savings, or will there be a cost increase?
Madam Chair,
Senator Evan.
Yeah, regarding the 1,555 inmates, there would be an increase that the DOC estimated on an annual basis to be, I believe it was $9.3 million per year, which I've submitted a budget amendment for.
I'm going to ask if there are other questions from other colleagues at this time. We do have speakers, and I believe somebody from the Department of Corrections is in the queue, if I'm not mistaken.
Madam Chairman.
If you still have follow-up questions, Senator Morrissey, I will allow you to ask them. Senator McDougal.
Madam Chairman, I have a couple brief questions. Senator Eben, in reviewing this, doesn't the Department of Corrections have staff on site that's at Lawrenceville that is supposed to ensure compliance and management with Department of Corrections standards?
Supposed to, yes.
Madam Chairman, does
Senator McDougal.
Senator Eben have some information that DOC is not fulfilling the obligations and that personnel is not in place?
Well, as far as I know, there are staff there, but there are not dental care. There's not adequate medical care. There's a higher staff ratio or lower inmate to staff ratio. Not enough staff in general compared to another correctional facility at Lawrenceville. I'm not saying that there's not a supervisor in place.
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
So that spurs an additional question. So I'm assuming that the Department of Corrections put out a requirement for staffing at the facility. it's my understanding that there is more than that requirement. So did Department of Corrections make a mistake about how many people needed to be there to staff?
I would just say simply that if the Department of Corrections were to maintain management of this facility, there would be 93 more employees, according to their own report.
Madam Chairman.
Senator McDougal.
So why did they not require 93 more employees as part of the contract? That could be fixed as well, could it not?
Madam Chair, I'm sure they could change that, but to me the simplest way is that we're the ones who deprive these people of their liberty. We're the ones who should ensure that their care is adequate and up to the same standards of other facilities in the state.
Madam Chairman, final question.
Senator McDougal.
I guess, or maybe it's a statement, not a comment, not a question. Madam Chairman, it seems to me like the issues that Senator Eben is expressing are ones that are clearly in the control of DOC, who he's advocating would do a better job. If they didn't require more staff, if their oversight is not doing it, I kind of am agreeing with Senator Morrissey. I don't know why we think it's a panacea that DOC is going to be doing a significantly better job.
I think that's the question before us. Colleagues, anybody else have any comments?
Madam Chair, this is Senator Boysko.
Senator Boysko.
Madam Chair, may I ask the patron a question, please?
Yes.
Mr. Eben, is it your understanding that under the current management of the facility, because of the benefits and salary, which I understand is something in the range of $22,000 for a starting guard, that they are not able to sufficiently get people to come and work for them? And if we were to put it back in the DOC with the standardized salaries and benefits, that we would actually encourage other people to come and apply for those jobs?
Yes, Madam Chair. I would say to Senator Boysko that we know they pay about $5,000 less than Department of Corrections standard pay scale. And if you pay more, you're going to be able to not have as many vacancies, if there are any, and you'll certainly attract quality employees.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. Is there a now I don't see Mr. Fritz in our queue. Is there a representative from the Department of Corrections waiting to be heard? I don't see anybody here. Okay. Mr. Fritz is okay. Mr. Fritz, could you enter our chat room, or I'm not sure what we're calling it these days. But thank you for being with us. And
good morning, Madam Chair.
good morning.
Jerry Fitz from the Virginia Department of Corrections. I'm here for any technical questions that may be asked.
Does the department have a position on this bill?
Madam Chair, we do not have a position on this bill.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I have a question for Mr. Fitz, Servo.
Senator Servo.
I'm sorry, was his name Fitz or Fritz?
Fitz.
Fitz, thank you. Mr. Fitz, does the Department of Corrections have any concern about the quality of services that are being rendered under this contract right now?
So the department Madam Chair, Senator Saraville, the department at this time, our response to the services that are being rendered at the Lawrenceville facility at this time, we have regional oversight at the Lawrenceville facility, that's DOC employees. We also have a monitor that's a full-time monitor on site at Lawrenceville as well. So to answer your question, I think any concerns that need to be addressed, we do address them as they come into the department.
No further questions, Madam Chair.
Senator Servo.
Thank Mr. Fitz. So can you just describe for me, like, is the contract that's in place there for a particular time? Does it get renewed? I mean, if you have concerns, do you address those through the procurement process? How does that work?
Madam Chair, Senator Servo, yes, there is a contract that's currently that's currently in place now. That contract will expire on July the 31st of 2023. And as you stated, any concerns, there's a procurement process, and that contract is reissued. Has at the end of July 1st, 2023, there is a possibility for renewal of that contract, and at that time, concerns certainly can be taken into consideration through the procurement process.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. Does the Department of Corrections go through a periodic audit, independent audit of the operations, of its operations, and has Lawrenceville ever been audited? Have there ever been recommendations other than the study that we asked for last year?
Madam Chair, we do, our facilities are audited and maintained by ACA standards, and we do follow those guidelines. And to answer your question, I do not know, I can get you the answer for the Lawrenceville results. I can certainly get that answer to you very quickly, but all of our facilities are maintained under ACA guidelines.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Madam Chair.
Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Director Fishburne. Is he still with us? Fitz, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. Good morning, Director Fitz. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Senator Morrissey. I can hear you. I'm a Corrections Operations Administrator. Thank you for the promotion, but
Yes, sir.
Director Clark is our director.
All right. Yes, sir. First of all, is it not true that the Department of Corrections maintains oversight over not only Lawrenceville, but the regional jails?
The Department of Corrections maintains oversight over Lawrenceville, but not the regional jails.
Okay. A regional jail like Riverside Regional Jail, the localities like Hopewell, Petersburg, Chesterfield, the sheriffs from those different localities are on a board, and they are the de facto oversight team. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I believe that is correct. I do not know that with all certainty, but I believe that is correct.
Okay. Now, with regard to your oversight at Lawrenceville only, can you tell this committee that the incidence of risk or danger or injury to staff or inmates is greater at Lawrenceville per population or per capita than it is at other DOC facilities?
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I cannot tell you that it's there's a more of a propensity for violence or for medical issues for individuals who are incarcerated in Lawrenceville. As Senator Eben did allude to, certainly DOC would, if DOC were to take over the operations of that facility, as Senator Eben alluded to, there would be, at the recommendation of the report that was put together, there would be more staff that would be required to maintain the facility.
All right. And last question, Mr. Fitz, how many regional jails are there in the Commonwealth?
Madam Chair, Senator Morrissey, I am not sure how many regional jails are in the Commonwealth.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. And when it's appropriate, I'd like to speak to this bill.
I understand, Senator Morrissey.
Madam Chair.
Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions for our witness.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Fitz, for being here. I am on page 22 of the report that DOC provided about changing the management of Lawrenceville. And it says, finally, in evaluating the cost and benefits, the department will carefully weigh the fiscal cost and operational benefits of the change, Our analysis clearly shows that it would have a higher cost if it came under VDOC. However, the overall level of security and program performance will increase as the facility takes on staffing and operational characteristics of the Virginia DOC managed facilities, reducing liability for the department as well as risk levels for the staff and inmates for the facility. So I have a question for you, Mr. Fitz, is that, is there a history of the operator who is under the contract right now? Have there been fines for inadequate staffing levels or any other challenges that you all have seen?
Madam Chair, Senator Boysko, I am not aware of any fines that have been levied against the current operator, GEO, of that facility.
Madam Chair, one follow-up question.
Senator Boysko.
Mr. Fitz, is it your belief that the report is accurate, that this would actually increase security and program performance as well as reducing liability for the department and risk levels for the staff and the inmates if we were to move back to the DOC management of the facility?
Madam Chair, Senator Boysko, if DOC were to move back to the operation of the facility, you would add on, there would be an additional need for staff to be hired, and that would be security staff as well as programmatic staff. So to answer your question, there would be more staff available to offer those programs and more security staff as well, in accordance with the results of that study.
Thank you for your good work. We appreciate your service.
I'm going to ask if there are other public speakers in our queue. Let's hear from the public. The clerk, please call the next speaker.
Cassie Schroth, are you ready to speak?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cassie Schroth with McGuire Woods Consulting on behalf of the GEO Group. And as a longstanding service provider to the Commonwealth, we oppose this bill. Since 2003, the department has contracted with GEO for management of Lawrenceville Correctional Center. And based on performance, value, and high quality service, the department renewed GEO's contract in 2018. Lawrenceville is a state-owned facility. It's not a private prison. In fact, there's no such thing as a private prison. GEO does not determine which individuals come to the facility or their release. And to be clear, GEO does not advocate on any criminal justice policy. Everything GEO does as a service provider is done pursuant to our contract with the Commonwealth. DOC is on site at Lawrenceville to ensure that all contractual obligations are met, and DOC enforces financial penalties for failure to meet contract terms, including unfilled staff positions. And that's a level of accountability and oversights that is unique to this facility. We're bound by DOC policies, protocols, and procedures as dictated in our contract. And just like any other procurement situation, the department can decide whether to continue GEO's contract or take over management. And while there are dozens of private contractors at all correctional facilities in the state, this bill targets one and unnecessarily forces the department into a situation that will increase costs for the Commonwealth. The report requested by this committee estimated that DOC management would increase current spending levels by at least $9.3 million a year. But what's missing from the report are the enhanced recidivism reduction programs GEO provides above and beyond the contractual requirements. All of your offices received a document from GEO with information on this programming. Additionally, I'd like to clarify that the salary information in the report is out of date. As of 2020, the starting salary for officers is $15 an hour or $31,200 a year. Finally, missing from the cost study are GEO's recent and scheduled infrastructure improvements at the facility, totaling over $1 million. So clearly, GEO is not putting profit over the lives of those entrusted to our care. And while this bill has a delayed enactment date, it will have immediate impacts. We know there's concern over staff openings at the facility, and the ability to recruit and retain qualified staff is not unique to Lawrenceville. And I think the department would concur with that statement, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. This bill would absolutely impede the recruitment and retention of officers working at the facility, since there's no guarantee the employees will have a job once the bill goes into effect. Ultimately, this could negatively affect the individuals at Lawrenceville and the region immediately. We respectfully ask the committee to oppose the bill, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions, colleagues? Thank you so much. Will the next speaker please be called?
Avi Panth, are you ready to speak?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you everyone for considering this bill. My name is Avi Panth, and I'm a civil rights attorney. I want to thank Senator Eben for his leadership here, and I'm here to support this bill. I want to address just a few points. I think the reason we're here is that the imperative of providing humane and quality care to inmates and reducing needless incarceration are in fundamental tension with the fiduciary duty of a contract prison company to maximize shareholder value. We're talking about companies at the center of cruel separation of undocumented children from their families. In the GEO Group specifically, we're talking about a company recently sued by its own shareholders for failing to take adequate precautions to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in overcrowded facilities. And it's why GEO Group has identified in its own SEC filings a decrease in occupancy levels as a material risk factor to their bottom line. And yet, beyond the ethics of whether we want to infuse incarceration in Virginia with profit motive, the private prison contract in Virginia simply does not provide good value for money. I think Senator Eben laid out a few points, but I want to emphasize the truth is that, while the nominal cost of a private prison is lower, the truth is that contract prisons do this by cutting corners and shifting costs to Commonwealth-run prisons, which we all ultimately pay for. And specifically, I would emphasize that the GEO Group refuses to take inmates with high-cost medical complications, shifting that expensive patient population burden to state-run facilities. And there's been extensive discussion in that report as well about needed repairs to the building and deferred maintenance. On the whole, guards at private prisons work longer hours, are paid less, and quit sooner. And, I'll close really by saying this is not a partisan issue. 22 states with both Democratic and Republican legislative majorities have passed similar legislation to restrict private prison companies, and I hope we will join them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have other speakers in the queue?
Yes, Madam Chair. Francis Ross, are you prepared to speak?
If possible, I would ask our speakers to keep their comments to 2 minutes.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Good morning. Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senators, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on behalf of Senate Bill 1179. First, I want to thank Senator Evans for putting this bill forward. My name is Francis Ross, and I'm speaking for myself and over the 900 members in the Inmate Support Virginia group. I'm also speaking on behalf of most of the people currently housed inside Lawrenceville. We in Virginia need to no longer allow prisons to be privately operated. In the past few years have shown us that the treatment and for both workers and residents behind the private prison walls are worse. I request that there also be some type of amendment made to this bill to allow for oversight if this bill was to pass, to have additional oversight between now and the time that it actually becomes in effect, because the conditions inside that facility are horrid. They are definitely worse than the regular Department of Virginia facilities. So with the fact that the GEO company would know that their contract isn't getting renewed, I would think that the lack of medical care and the poor food quality and staffing issues and things like that would only get worse, knowing that they had nothing more to lose. And I would also like to take one quick minute to thank Senator Morrissey for making a big point that the Virginia Department of Corrections as a whole needs more oversight. So I ask and encourage everybody who's watching, both senators, delegates, and regular people just like me, to let your voice be heard and to speak up for these issues. Thank you again for taking the time to listen to me, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, and you came within 8 seconds of your time frame. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Charles Meyer, are you prepared to speak?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
I apologize for any background noise. I am currently activated with the Virginia National Guard, and of course, anything that I say doesn't reflect an opinion from the Department of Defense or the National Guard in any way. These are my own personal. I would like to urge demonstrate that they are either unwilling or unable to uphold the terms of their contract. I know that they just mentioned that they have a $1 million plus infrastructure update coming, but they've ignored the fact that there are over $10 million in deferred maintenance at the facility, which the contract explicitly states is the responsibility of the GEO Group as the contractor. So while they might be putting in $1 million now,
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, you somehow cut off.
apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So while the GEO Group may be investing $1 million now, while their contract is threatened, there's no reason to believe that they will cover the other $9 million. And certainly I would expect that bill to continue to rise as if the contract is renewed, as they are no longer under threat or under as much scrutiny. Additionally, they are fined for lack of proper staffing. Documents that I've FOIA'd have shown that on average, between the time that their contract was renewed in 2018 and August of 2020, they've been, their pay essentially has been docked on average $30,000 per month for understaffed or improperly staffed shifts. It's called liquidated damages. And additionally, I would like to point out that the report notes that many of the infrastructure changes that are required are to basic security systems, such as cameras or communications devices.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask you to conclude your remarks, but you may email us comments to District 31 at senate.virginia.gov, and I will share them. Okay, we'll hear from the next speaker. Nikki.
Francesca Hilton, are you prepared to speak?
Yes.
Welcome, Ms. Hilton. You've got the floor.
Welcome. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My husband is currently in Lawrenceville Correctional, and I fully support this bill. He has been there for the last 4 years, and he has a heart condition. And since he has been at Lawrenceville, he hasn't gotten the proper care. It wasn't up until recently that he was able to go see his cardiologist. And because of the lack of medical attention that he has gotten, it has fatally gotten worse. Lawrenceville do not hold up their end of, the contract as far as medical, dental. Sometimes they don't get served breakfast till 3 o'clock in the afternoon because of short staff. Staffing works 14, 15, 16-hour shifts. So that puts the staffing in danger. That puts the inmates in danger. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on at that facility that's just shouldn't be legal. The administration there, they need to investigate, y'all need to investigate that administration, because, we haven't been able to see our loved ones since March 8th. And even since March of last year because, of COVID-19. But even at that, there's still contraband getting in. There's still cell phones getting in. There's been multiple overdoses that have happened that has never been reported to the media because, they keep everything on the down low because they don't want to expose the corruption at that facility. But I can attest that this is what's going on inside this prison. And I've spoke to numerous news stations and because something has to be done. Our loved ones need the adequate medical care, and I strongly support this bill because it's just not right. And I feel like if DOC did take over the operation, then it would be better.
Thank you, Ms. Hilton. I'm very sorry about your personal experiences at Lawrenceville, and I appreciate you sharing your experience with us. So thank you, and we will take your comments into consideration as we deliberate on this bill.
Okay.
Let's see, anybody else? Okay. So colleagues, this bill is before us. It will have to be re-referred to Finance. I think Senator Eben pointed out that the enactment would not take place until 2024, but the current contract with GEO ends in 2023. So the department would either have to extend the contract for a year or take over management a year earlier than what this enactment clause says.
Madam Chair.
Chair.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Height, and then Senator Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of information for the committee. Senator Marsden has put in Senate Bill 1363, dealing with the management of and authority of the Board of Regional and Local Jails, that actually, I think, highlight a number of various elements that are not related to this bill, but are related to some of the committee members' comments. His bill would add ensuring the development of long-range policies and programs and plans for correction services provided at state and local levels, review of budgets and requests and appropriations for the department prior to submission to the governor, and on all applications for federal funds, and to monitor the activities of the department and its effectiveness in implementing standards and the goals of the board. And so I just want to make sure that the committee is aware that this bill will also be coming to this committee as well, dealing with larger statewide framework. And further, more, Madam Chair, I think the underlying policy question that Senator Eben proposes is, do we want companies earn profit from the imprisonment of Virginians that are incarcerated? I think that's one of the primary overall policy questions before the committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think that's correct. Senator Morrissey?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there others who want to speak after Senator Morrissey? Okay. Senator Morrissey, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank Senator Eben for bringing the bill, because I think his heart is in the right place. He wants to make sure that inmates in Virginia are treated humanely, get adequate medical and dental care, and it's that reason I believe that he brought this bill. But I think it's flawed, and I oppose this bill, and here's why. First of all, the bill has expanded greatly. It's not just the Lawrenceville Correctional Center, but at the beginning of Senator Eben's remarks, he said it will also include regional jails. There are 31 regional jails in the Commonwealth. Second, the gist of the bill is that now the operation of the prison facility, focusing on management, custody, security, will shift from this private enterprise back to DOC, but leaving exactly what Senator Eben wants to address. If you look at page 5, lines 273 et sec, food, commissary, which is a canteen, the medical and auxiliary services like phone, the education, the training, employment opportunities, counseling, recreational, religious, all of those can still be farmed out. Let me tell you the biggest problem that I see in our prisons, a singular problem. Inmates who have a horrible toothache can't get dental care, they get oral gel. They've got a splitting migraine headache. They pay $4 for a pack of 2 Tylenol. And if they want to talk to their loved ones, you know what they do? They pay $1, $1.10, $1.50 a minute. It is that profit which the patron said he is trying to take away still remains in this bill. This bill still allows to have a private contractor for the medical, the auxiliary services, the food, the canteen, which is exactly the problem that I see. Because people don't get the diet they want, or enough food that they want, they can go to canteen if they've got the money. A young man who is incarcerated from Portsmouth or Norfolk, and he wants to talk to his wife or his children, yes ma'am, can pay over $1 a minute to do so. This isn't being addressed in this bill. With the 31 regional jails in here, it's going to have a huge impact. I respectfully acknowledge the patrons' sentiments and heart, which I applaud, but this bill is a bad bill, and I'd encourage the members to vote it down. And thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Morrissey, I think you have concluded the amount of time one should generously allocate to a colleague. I am going to ask Senator Eben to quickly respond, and we have 2 individuals in the queue who came in late to speak. At the chairman's prerogative, I am going to allow each one 2 minutes. Senator Eben, would you like to wait?
Yeah, very briefly.
Okay.
Senator Morrissey seems to want an overhaul of the entire correction system, which I'm not going to evaluate whether that's needed, but this bill does not attempt to overhaul the entire system. It's not a big deal to include regional jails because it would just align the policy for all our correctional facilities. We do not have privately managed regional jails now. It would just ensure that we have the same policy for regional jails in the future as we have for our penitentiaries if this were to pass. The GEO Group's report, or not the GEO Group's report, the DOC report said that this facility is not recommended for inmates needing medical care. Any inmate can fall into a situation where they're going to develop a need for medical care. And the gentleman, one of the witnesses referred to some FOIA documents. I have those documents, and the operator was fined for inadequate staffing at least in September, December, August, September, and December are the only ones that I've had a chance to review. But we know that there's inadequate staffing according to DOC standards and including according to the contract as well. So I'll just conclude there.
Thank you, Senator Eben. Senator Boysko, I know you're in the queue. I would ask if you could wait so we can hear the 2 public speakers, and then I will call on you. Is that amenable to you?
Chair.
Thank you. Clerk, please call the first speaker. I will ask each speaker to keep your comments to 2 minutes, and thank you for joining us.
Mr. Kirk Jones, are you prepared to speak?
Yes. Can you?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you for joining us.
What's the math problem?
Thank you, Madam.
Mr. Kirk Jones.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. You are welcome to submit comments.
Madam Chair.
Yes, we can hear you now.
I apologize.
No problem. Please restart the clock.
My name is Kurt Jones. I represent the National Coalition of Public Safety Officers. And before I begin my written comments, I do want to address the concerns of my good friend Senator Morrissey, where he referred to page 5 of the bill, and section 272 is what Senator Eben is changing, but the rest of the lines in that section from 272 through line 278 are existing code that applies to all of the current facility that Department of Corrections operates. At this time, the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Virginia, Article 1, Section 3 reads, the government is or ought to be instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of people. We believe the protection and security of the people is a prime responsibility of state government. The responsibility includes the safe housing and supervision of duly convicted offenders in Virginia's correctional facilities. Our courts have sentenced individuals in terms of commitment for their crimes against our fellow citizens. It should be the job of the state to carry out these sentences, not private for-profit corporations. The bill will create transparency in knowing that the Commonwealth's offenders are properly supervised by the Department of Corrections, well-trained and experienced correctional officers. we support this bill, Senate Bill 1179. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. Clerk, please call the next speaker. And again, I would ask you to keep your comments to 2 minutes. And this is our final speaker on this bill, and from the public.
Mr. Donald Baylor, are you prepared to speak?
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Yes. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. In speaking to this bill, I just want to cite that there have been extensive studies done that dates back for a number of years, as far back as 1996, in fact, that show that private prisons, even though they claim cost savings, these savings does not, in many studies done, the savings do not materialize. To maximize return for their investors, for-profit prison companies have preserved incentives to cut costs in vital areas such as security personnel, medical care, and programming, threatening the health and safety of prisoners and staff. Now, this was studied, these studies were looked at as far back as 1996 by the Government Accountability Office. And what they found was that in review, major studies related to costs in private prisons, they found that alleged cost savings from private prisons were inconclusive. In 1999, University of Cincinnati researchers conducted a meta-analysis of 33 cost-effectiveness evaluations of public and private prisons from 24 separate studies. They concluded the private prisons were not more cost efficient than public prisons, and cautioned that relinquishing the responsibility of managing prisons to the private sphere is unlikely to alleviate much of the financial burden on states and correctional budgets. And where they found that these private prisons that over several states failed to provide cost savings. Some of those states were Arizona, Florida, Georgia, New Mexico, Ohio, and Hawaii.
Mr. Baylor, thank you. I'll have to ask you to conclude.
Okay. In conclusion, Madam Chair, our position is that prison should not be for profit, and it's a moral issue as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. All right, that concludes our public comment. Senator Boysko.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one question for, I just came up with a question that I just want some clarification from the patron. On page 15 of the substitute, it goes over on, starting on line 373, discussing the contracts that are available, and it says, crossed out, I'm just a little bit confused because of Senator Morrissey's question. In line number 380, which is crossed out under D, provide proper food, clothing, housing, and medical care for inmates, which is stricken. Does that mean that under your bill, private providers would no longer be able to give those services?
I don't have a copy of the substitute before me. I didn't bring my computer, but I would say that the intent is only for the management. And if there, I don't know, I can't see what's stricken there. I don't know if the drafter is here.
It is stricken it's on, starting with the section on line 353, state correctional facilities, private contracts, says the director shall, and pardon me for drawing this out, but I think this is really important. The director, subject to provisions in the Virginia procurement, and maybe our clerk might want to.
We'll ask David May.
Clarify this for us.
Madam Chair, Senator Boysko, That particular provision only relates to the contract itself. So when DOC contracts with the facility to be operated privately, this language says that contract has got to ensure that if you're going to operate this facility, you are going to provide proper food, clothing, housing, and medical care for the inmates. It does not take away DOC's facility to sub out their healthcare services to private companies.
Thank you for the clarification. Madam Chair, I'd just like to make a comment about the bill, speaking to the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that Senator Morrissey is concerned about the larger scope, as am I. However, sometimes I have learned in this body that we have to take one piece at a time. I support Senator Ebbins' effort to take the private management from oversight of Lawrenceville, and I know that we have more work to do. As we heard, Senator Marsden's going to be carrying a bill that will continue to put more oversight on, and I encourage our colleagues to vote for the bill.
Thank you, Senator Boysko. I think it's time for a motion. Again, this bill would have to be re-referred to Finance.
Move to report and refer.
Motion has been made to report and re-refer by Senator Boysko and seconded by Senator McPike. Motion's before us. I'll ask the clerk to open the roll.
Three ayes, 11 nays.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Eben. The bill does not report. I'm sorry. Yes, he'll be my next one. Thank you for your presentation. Before I call on Senator Obenshain, who is in the queue, the request of the patron, Senator Donovan, she asked that we take Senate Bill 1185 by for the day. This, because of our tight schedule, quick session, I'm going to allow a one-time take it by for the day. So I might as well just announce that now. Senator Donovan has been granted that. Okay, please bring in Senator Obenshain. Welcome. I don't know if you're aware, but we rolled Senator DeStepp's 1293 bill into your 1104. It's a good thing. And you also have Senate Bill 1125 before us. Go ahead. Which?
Thank you. It is in the form that it left the Senate in with bipartisan support. It went to the House and didn't get a hearing, but it basically, to refresh your recollection, while it set out to do a few more things initially, it basically is a sunshine bill now, and clarifies some of the duties, eliminates some of the some of the misunderstandings that may have occurred between the Parole Board and the State Board of Corrections or the Department of Corrections. It clarifies whose responsibility it is to see that the deadlines and the notification requirements have been met before releasing an inmate, and it clarifies the information that is to be posted by the Parole Board on its website upon its decision to parole an inmate.
Madam Chair.
Yes, this bill, we have seen this bill. We should be able to act on it quickly. Who was Senator Servell?
Yeah, question for the patron.
Please, go ahead.
So this bill is identical to the bill that left our floor?
Yes, sir.
I move to report.
Great. Motion's been made to report. Is there a second? Many seconds. I'll take Senator Cosgrove. Okay. Any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk open the roll? Did you have public comment here? I think they'll be happy.
I'm sorry?
We're fine. Does it have to go to finance?
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
The motion was to report and
Madam Chair.
refer to finance.
Okay, that was my motion then.
That was your motion. Is the second still with us? I'm going to have to ask the clerk to open the poll again, open the roll again. Okay.
Ayes 14, no 0.
All right, passes unanimously, but it's re-referred to finance. Senator Obenshain, 1125.
This is a bill that really could have been part of the other bill. This is a very small sliver of parole. It simply requires a victim to be notified of any decision to parole an offender in a crime in which they were a victim within 7 days of the decision. It provides for the notification to be provided either in writing or electronically, and allows the victims to opt out if they do not want to be notified. The current law requires the parole board to contact victims before a hearing is held, but there's no requirement to notify the victim that the person is to be released. And this particularly is of importance in cases involving domestic violence. There are many victims out there who want to be prepared in the event that the perpetrator of the crime for which they were the victim is going to be released. And that's all that this bill does.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Senator Spruill.
question to the patron.
Go ahead.
Would this also, once they notify them, would this also delay what they're trying to release of the person?
No, because the notification requirement is just 7 days before release. There's I think it's a 21-day period after the decision is made before somebody is going to be released. So this just gives a 7-day notification requirement to the victim.
Thank you. Madam Chair, second question I have.
Senator Spruill.
Could you have those who have their phone keep from dinging and put it on vibrate? It's annoying.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing.
That's not to you, sir.
Okay.
Instead of saying that somebody's phone keep going off, if they can just put it on vibrate, that'll be a help. Thank you.
Okay. I have a question, but I think a colleague does. Senator Morrissey.
Madam Chair, I have a question to the patron. Senator Obershane, directing your attention to line 31, the heart of your bill, that the department provide written or electronic notice. It doesn't say attempt, it says that they've got to provide. You would acknowledge, would you not, that it's very possible that the victim witness coordinator in the Commonwealth Attorney's Office and the parole board do not have the up-to-date telephone number and or address of victims. How does your bill deal with that scenario where it mandates that they require the victim, it mandates that they notify the victim, but they may not have the wherewithal to do so?
This simply requires them to provide notice, to simply provide written or electronic notice. It doesn't, I mean, the law, the bill that we just, that you just acted upon dealt with the notice that's to be provided to the victims and the victim witness coordinator during the investigation stage. This simply provides that notice is to be posted, either provided by internet or in writing. I would suggest that sending it out is providing that notice.
Okay.
And I think that that's what the intent is. There is a provision in here for a victim who just doesn't want to be re-traumatized by by any further notice to say to opt out, to remove themselves from that
All right.
requirement.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have a question. Now, what if they don't have contact information for the victim?
They're supposed to have contact information for the victim.
But for argument's sake, if they did not, I mean, would this stop the decision? Would this stop somebody from being released?
There is no provision for stopping the release in this bill. The other bill that just was acted upon sets forth the requirements that have to be met in order for the Department of Corrections to be able to open the door. This does not have any such requirement. At least that's not my understanding is that it does not.
Would you concur?
Madam Chair, that would be correct. It won't affect the actual granting of parole at all. It just requires that the notice be sent within 7 days of the determination.
And if there's no address or no way of contacting the victim, that's not in any way going to impede the decision to grant parole?
Madam Chair, no, it will not. Basically, what the code says is you've got to send notice, this along with other notices that are sent in certain instances to the last contact address that was provided. And if you don't have one, it tells the board to endeavor diligently to contact the victim. So whatever that means, that's what you do when you don't have your address.
Okay. Well, based on these responses, I will support the bill, but I think I'm sort of reinforcing the concern Senator Spruill raised.
Madam Chair.
Senator Servell.
Thanks. I have a question for council. So, David, can you confirm for me that the victim is not defined in the code in any place?
Madam Chair, Senator Serval, I am not aware, but I can't say that it's not defined anywhere. Is there a specific reason that you're...
Yeah, Madam Chair, let me ask the patron a question. So, I've searched 53.1, which is the probation title, to try and figure out if victim is actually defined anywhere, and I can't find any definition. And I know sometimes it might seem fairly apparent who the victim is, but there might be other crimes where it gets kind of ambiguous. For example, if the victim is a business or a corporation, or there's perhaps some crimes where the victim might be the government. And so the way this is worded, seems to me it might have some applicational problems. I mean, if the victim is not a human being, and it wasn't like a physical type crime, like where they, there's a touching involved or something, or an injury to a person. And then my second question is, we put stuff in the code maybe you can answer these. We put stuff in the code all the time that says there was rules, but a lot of times we don't put what the consequences are for those rules. And so it's not clear to me what the consequence is if this 7-day deadline isn't met, what that means. I mean, does that mean that everything has to start over, or the parole is void, or does it give somebody grounds to go get an injunction? I mean, what exactly is the enforcement mechanism for this deadline? So those are my two questions.
There is none, and it simply imposes a mandate upon the board to notify those victims. And to the first point that is made, there are references throughout current code to the victim, and the notice that has to be given to the victim as a prerequisite to the parole decision being made. It is a requirement under current law that the parole board give the victim or inquire of the victim in order to, as part of the investigation prior to making a parole decision. This is simply after the decision has been made, simply as a requirement to endeavor to the best of their ability to let the victim know. If you look in this at line 73, it refers to, I believe 73, 71 already refers to the victim of a crime. It gives them the ability to submit a written request to be notified under current law, and if they know who the victim is, this simply says notify them.
Let me ask for clarification first. Mr. May, would you concur with that answer?
Madam Chair, I didn't hear all of it. I was looking up the question posed, and I did find the definition of victim that's used most instances. It's a reference to another code section outside of Title 53.1 in the event that the committee wishes to look at who all this will include. And that definition appears in 19.2-11.01. Appears fairly broad.
It's fairly broad.
Happy to read it, but.
Madam Chair?
Senator Sproul.
What scares me about this mandate, I'm still referring back to that you notify within the 7 days. As I'm getting back to your question, this mandate thing, that they have tried to notify the victim, whether it's by phone, whether it's by writing, or whether by email, whatever. And I can't get a hold of the email. And this doesn't say, the word mandate. What scares me is that once they have tried their best to get a hold of the victim within that 7 days, and they cannot, and nothing doesn't say clearly that after that 7 days, if we cannot get a hold of that person, the victim, nothing does say that you cannot hold up the process of letting that person be released. All I want to know is that can something be put in there saying that after they have tried their best, whether it's by email, whatever, after tried their best, that this does not hold up the process? You going back to a different code and all, that's the lawyer's term. I want for a layman's term. I want to know, once you do that 7 days, and you cannot, after all the process.
May I make a suggestion?
Yes, okay, Senator Obenshain, because I was going to.
Mr. Mays pointed out that on line 65, it imposes an obligation for the board to endeavor diligently to contact the victim prior to making a decision. If we were to simply, I'd ask counsel, if we were to simply port that language as well into the notification requirement for notifying a victim after a decision has been made, would that work?
That would be
perhaps satisfy the concerns that have been articulated.
That would be helpful. Senator Sproul, would you agree that would be helpful?
So after that 7 days, they can't, then it's still doesn't hold the process up.
It simply says that, would simply say that they shall
endeavor
diligently, just as they are currently required to do prior to a decision.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Helpful. Are you offering that as an amendment, Senator Sproul?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There's a second. All those in favor of the amendment as stated signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay. The bill is amended.
Madam Chairman.
Is there one? Well, I'll take one other comment and then a motion.
Right here.
Senator Sproul, Senator Sorvell.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So, David, I've now found this definition of victim. I guess it's in 19.2, 11.01b. Is that definition incorporated into Title 53.1 in any place?
Madam Chair, Senator Servo, it's not directly. It is by reference in several sections in 53.1. Like, for instance, if you look at 53.1-134 or 53.1-155. So 155 is actually in this bill, the second section in this bill, and it references this 19.2 section. I can tell you exactly what.
Okay, but Madam Chair, further question.
Senator Sorvell.
Okay, I understand it references in several places, but the definition is not incorporated into the title, so therefore the definition doesn't apply unless it's referenced. So in order for this statute to be clear, we should either apply the definition of victim in 19.2 to everything in this, either this chapter, this article, or this title, or at a minimum this statute, so there's no ambiguity about what a victim is. Don't you agree?
Madam Chair, Senator Servo, I would agree that if you want to ensure that that definition is used here, that the only way would be make a reference to it.
I guess my question is, it would put some definition around it. Otherwise, one could also interpret this narrowly. Okay, I think clarity is the better approach. Senator.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I just want to point out that there are already provisions in existing law in this statute addressing victim that have been in there for a long time. And to the extent that this would help define all of the references to victim, it's going to be broader.
It's going to be broader, yeah.
I know that, Madam Chair. Further question?
Senator Servo.
I know that, and that's why I asked whether it ought to be incorporated into the title, the chapter, or the article, or just the statute. And I was asking counsel for that, and I guess it might require him a little more analysis to do that. Maybe that ought to be a floor amendment instead of a committee amendment if we have a chance to chew on it a little bit. But
I would prefer a floor amendment, then you can really chew on it.
Madam Chair? Madam Chair?
Senator Boysko.
I have a question for the patron. Looking at the definition of victim in Section 3D, already says victim shall be notified by the Department of Corrections or a sheriff or a jail or superintendent when in whose custody an escape, change of name, transfer, or release or discharge of a person occurs pursuant to the provisions of 53.1-133.02 and 53.1160, or when the accused is released on bail, or if they have provided their names, current addresses, and telephone numbers in writing, should be provided through the Virginia State VINE system or other similar electronic automated system. So my question, Mr. Patron, is why would we need this additional piece of legislation?
Well, first of all, the parole board already has an obligation to notify or to endeavor to utilize its best interest to notify a victim that somebody is up for parole. And this simply gives that victim notice within 7 days after the decision has been made, 14 days before the release occurs. The notification that may be given to a victim from a jail or a prison may occur later, and I think that there are some groups that either have distributed a one-pager on this or would like to address it that have particular concerns about victims of domestic violence and giving them an opportunity to act before the release actually occurs.
Madam Chair, thank you very much. I appreciate the explanation. That makes it much more clear for me.
I'm going to ask quickly if there are any public speakers.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment after talking with Mr. May.
You do have an amendment?
Yeah.
Okay, and what is your amendment?
It would be, I guess, around line 55. Is it 55? Somewhere at the end, 55, the end of 53.1136, saying for purposes of this section, the term victim shall be the same as defined in 11.01, subsection B, I think is what it is. And then Mr. May has committed to me that he will look at this and see if we need an amendment to take it to the entire title more broadly, and we can fix that on the floor if necessary, but we can do this at a minimum, which would have the least damage to the whole code.
With the expectation you'll put further thought into this. There's a motion, Senator. I'm accepting your amendment as a motion. Is that correct? Yes. Anybody?
Move, and I second with the rules.
Okay, is there a second? Second. There's a second from Senator Mason. Does anybody need further clarification? Okay, all those in favor of this additional amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Hearing none. Okay, now we have the bill amended twice before us. I'm ready to take public speakers, and are there any public speakers?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Andrew Brashear, are you ready to speak?
And how many are there?
2.
We have 2 public speakers. If you are in favor of the bill, I would suggest you just say you support the bill. If you're opposed to the bill, please indicate likewise. In all cases, keep your remarks to 2 minutes or less. Clerk, please call the first speaker.
Mr. Andrew Brashear. Mr. Jonathan Iglesias.
Appears
Good
as though
morning. Can you all hear me?
Jonathan, how are you?
Hey, good to see you.
Good
Thank
to
you,
see
Madam
you.
Chair. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Jonathan Iglesias with the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Violence Action Alliance. We support this bill and any effort like it to make the process of release and reentry more trauma-informed and more transparent for all parties. In particular, as Senator Obenshain spoke to domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. It's a common sense practice, and we just wanted to register our support for it and thank the patron for introducing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, I need a motion on the
Move to report.
Move to report. Senator Reeves, second. Senator Boysko. Okay, will the clerk please open the roll?
Fourteen ayes, 0 nays.
Congratulations. Excuse me, this motion has to read, it's got to be re-referred to finance, according to my notes. Re-refer to finance. Senator Boysko, second. Okay, clerk, please clear the roll, open it again, and my apologies. Report unanimously, but it is on its way to finance. Okay, thank you. Okay, colleagues, we completed the bills before us. We do have a brief presentation by the governor's office, actually Brad Copenhaver. He's going to give us an outline of what is in the governor's legalization of marijuana package. I will be setting up a subcommittee. We have 2 bills that will come before this committee that deal with the legalization of marijuana. One is a bill carried by Senators Eben and Lucas, the governor's bill, that's Senate Bill 1406. The second bill is carried by Senator Morsi, Senate Bill 1243. I have asked some of you to serve on a subcommittee, which I expect you to meet next week. It is my goal will be to act on a bill that legalizes marijuana next Friday, because the bill will then have to be re-referred to judiciary, and from there it has to be re-referred to finance. It is a large bill. Thank you in advance to those of you who have agreed to serve on the committee that will look at this, the legalization of marijuana. Your chair will be Senator McPike, Senator Spruill, Senator Surville, and Senator Boysko, Senator McDougal, Senator Reeves, and Senator Kiggins will be serving on the subcommittee. And I just will note for the public that the subcommittee meetings will be advertised. Individuals who want to speak to the legalization of marijuana, those 2 bills, need to speak before the subcommittee. It is the practice of this committee to not hear testimony twice. So if you speak to the subcommittee, you are not likely to be heard before rehab next Friday unless you represent an organization. So I hope we make that clear. Part of the reason we appoint subcommittees, we want them to delve into the details of a bill or a policy issue, and we want them to hear the public comment as they're delving into that area. Okay, having said all that.
Madam Chair.
There's a question, and Senator McPike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just for those that are watching, the subcommittee meetings are scheduled for next Tuesday and Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. So we'll have a significant amount of material to go through. So we'll be working on publishing a more formal docket. But again, next Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, 8 a.m. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Without further ado, Brad, I will give you 10 minutes to do an overview, and just so the committee has a flavor of what's in the governor's bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a presentation that Katie Finley from our office, from Secretary Kerry's office, is going to share. So Katie, can you start sharing your screen? We're going to go through this. and try to be very quickly. So really appreciate the time this morning, Madam Chair, giving us this opportunity. Thank you to Senator Lucas and Senator Eben for carrying this bill. I want to start by talking about how we got to this point. We've been, Virginia's been on this path for a long time, 6 years now. Back in 2015, the first kind of allowance for a possession of medical cannabis. And then in 2016, General Assembly created the Pharmaceutical Processor Program, allowed for up to 5 licensees, reenacted in 2017, and those regulations were finalized. The program has been expanded since then to allow for any disease diagnosis to get that to have access to that. And our most of our 5 licensees began dispensing last year. Last year, the General Assembly also decriminalized possession of small amounts of marijuana. Included in that legislation were 2 studies. There were also 2 studies last year. Included in that legislation was one for the governor's office. There was also one conducted by JLARC that reviewed all the other states who have legalized marijuana, talked to stakeholders and state regulators here in Virginia, and had a real focus on public health and social equity. That report came out in November. Many of you have seen and reviewed that. There is a second report in addition in the enactment clause of that decrim legislation. A group of secretaries pulled together a 21-member work group of policy experts, health professionals, government officials, and community leaders. We talked to other states, criminal justice reform advocates, other marijuana and equity policy thought leaders. We had 15 public meetings, reviewed this a lot between July and October, and released our final report in November. So Governor Northam, back in November, when he came out for support of legalization, he outlined 5 bedrock principles with this, on which this legislation should rest. The first is social equity, racial equity, and economic equity. We know that marijuana prohibition has historically been based in discrimination, and so this legislation tries to tackle the impact of criminalization laws that have disproportionately harm minority and low-income communities. The second is public health. The third principle is ensuring protections for young people. As a pediatrician, this is obviously very important to Governor Northam. The fourth principle is upholding the Virginia Clean Indoor Air Act and aligning marijuana with tobacco. And again, that's something that's very close to Governor Northam, as he championed that when he was a state senator. And finally, the fifth principle is data collection. And this is an area where Virginia has an opportunity to be a real national leader in this issue. According to public health experts that we spoke to, no other state has taken such a comprehensive preemptive approach to collect robust data on all these topics before the legal market opens. So we're really going to monitor the impact of the policies that we implement. So I want to, before I get into kind of details of the bill, I want to talk about the big picture. So first of all, one of the biggest questions that I know a lot of you have is, what's the timeline for the enactment of such a large policy and regulatory undertaking? In all the conversations that we've had with other states, we were told not to expect to be able to set up a successful program any earlier than 18 to 24 months after the legislation passes. So this bill requires ABC to promulgate regulations by July 1st, 2022, and then stipulates that retail sales of the product could begin by January 1st, 2023. So that gives ABC time to consider what those regulations will look like, and for other pieces of that regulatory and structural puzzle to fall into place. But however, the bill requires that the expungement process, expunging past marijuana arrests and convictions, will begin immediately once the bill becomes effective on July 1st of this year. The bill makes the minimum purchase age 21, in line with all other states and with Virginia's tobacco and alcohol laws. The bill limits no more than 1 ounce at a time to be sold, or an equivalent amount as determined by regulation. Furthermore, in line with all the other states except for 2, the legislation provides Virginians the opportunity to cultivate their own cannabis for personal use. The bill also provides for the limited concentration of retail establishments in communities that opt in to allowing them, and it provides ABC the authority to limit the number of marijuana licenses that it grants. The bill also tries to promote a diverse, competitive marijuana industry and imposes additional fees and requirements on those businesses who may wish to operate a vertically integrated model. The legislation has firm requirements about product safety, limiting advertising, especially to children. We have a lot of child safety measures in here, including with labeling and packaging. The bill updates the criminal code to reflect legalization, including penalties for consumption while driving. And then we're proposing a retail tax that ensures we both meet our revenue goals and discourage the illicit market. And then we have some ideas for where that tax revenue should go as well. Finally, the keystone of this of this entire bill is marijuana legalization as a social equity endeavor. That was first on the list of Governor Northam's bedrock principles. We work closely with Dr. Janice Underwood at the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and her team. And we feel like we have set up a really good set of principles in this bill. There's 3 things there that I'm going to talk about as well. So moving on, I want to just address very quickly, I know this is the large bill, but I want to talk about kind of what this bill addresses and kind of why it's so large. First of all, a lot of the bill is just going through the code and adding the word cannabis into ABC's name. Another large part of the bill is going through pieces of the code and striking or changing references to sections that have changed or won't exist anymore. So that's one of the reasons why this bill is so long. The other reason is because it's comprehensive. We have put a lot of work into this. Both the JLARC report and our work group report spent countless hours, talked to experts and talked to advocates, and we feel really proud of the product that we've come up with, and that's why the bill is so large and comprehensive. So looking into these policy areas, I'm going to move on to the next slide, Katie. You can see that we proposed to put this at Virginia ABC, which is the only state agency that has experience regulating a controlled product that was once previously totally prohibited. We'll benefit from ABC's experience with this regard and the efficiencies that can bring. But while we know this is a new, unique industry, ABC will be counseled by a cannabis advisory board in creating the regulations. That board is going to be made up of 8 members who have experience in the industry, who represent historically disadvantaged community as well and health expertise, and then also our DEI director. We'll also have a cannabis health advisory board. Our marijuana pharmaceutical processor program, which is currently over at DHP, will be transferred over to ABC within the next year or so. This bill is going to leave that program as untouched as possible. And we want it to continue to serve those patients for which medical grade cannabis products are effective treatments. What we learned from other states is it's really a good idea to have all marijuana programs under one umbrella. ABC is going to be directed to develop a robust licensing program. We have 5 different license types: cultivation, manufacturing, wholesale, retail, and testing. We also have included in there a cultivation license that will allow some more flexibility for farmers who want some more flexibility than our industrial hemp program provides. ABC will also have the ability to limit the number of licenses. We've seen in other states that have not managed their marijuana market as well as they could, such as Oregon has seen a lot of problems with supply and demand there. We'll also include a preference for social equity qualified applicants, and I can address that a little bit more later. And then we finally include a requirement for mandatory seed to sale tracking of all products, which is crucial to make sure that Virginia has no products that are crossing state lines or entering the illegal market, which would invite federal scrutiny on the Commonwealth. Also, all products are going to have to be tested by those independent third-party labs that are going to be licensed by ABC. That testing is important to ensure that the safety of all the products. We have a strong framework for regulating these products. So, for example, we have product composition safety measures for adulterants. Products are not going to be allowed to contain nicotine, alcohol, or other narcotics. Manufacturers will have to undergo food safety inspection, just like all other food manufacturers. The bill sets THC limits by serving and by package, and the board will develop and enforce other cannabinoid potency limits for various products as well. Furthermore, the bill specifies warning labels on the products, must have a universal THC symbol and other details determined by the board. Those labels won't be able to make false or misleading claims about health benefits, for example. Child safety is very important. No product will be allowed to be in the form of an animal, human, vehicle, or other form likely to be attractive to children. We have some other requirements there as well. For packaging requirements, clear information on the cannabinoid content, opaque packaging with the flexibility for the board to actually require plain packaging, and other rules to meet all the other safety goals outlined in the bill. In addition to all that, all retailers will be required to provide information to consumers about the potential risks of marijuana use. Retailers will be required to keep all the products out of the reach of consumers and only sell product in a direct face-to-face manner. So speaking of retailers, the governor's bill requires all taxes to be collected at the retail point of sale. The bill includes a 21% excise tax that is in addition to the existing state sales tax, and localities who opt into having retail sales could also institute a 3% local tax. So that brings the total tax rate to right around 30%, which is in line with states such as Colorado and Illinois. And our goal is really to generate enough revenue for the program and to cover other revenue goals, but then low enough to capture the illicit market. So the next slide is a chart that shows where Virginia would kind of be in relation to some of those other states from the JLARC report. So look at Colorado. That's kind of what we were aiming for, to be right around there, because Colorado is kind of held up as a model of a state who has done this really well. So the first use of that excise tax, as this bill proposes, will go to covering the cost of setting up the program, and the governor has included a Treasury line item of credit in the budget to cover the startup costs. But after that, the revenues would be allocated 40% to early childhood education for at-risk 3- and 4-year-olds, 30% to a new cannabis equity reinvestment fund, and I'll talk about that. 25% will go to substance use prevention and treatment programs, and then the remaining 5% will be allocated to other public health programs. Both JLARC and our work group highlighted the importance of funding substance use disorder prevention and public health campaigns. Cannabis use disorder impacts youth disproportionately, and it's also associated with mental illness and other substance use disorders. So these dedicated funds are going to help us pay for education campaigns and strategies to prevent marijuana abuse and mitigate any potential negative public health impacts. A large part of this bill also deals with several changes to Virginia's criminal code. First of all, underage, that's under 21, possession and consumption will be illegal. We're changing the code to reflect an updated status of a substance that was previously illegal, so we had to create some new classes of civil and criminal offenses as well, just to reflect that changing status. For one example, rather than having a crime to sell or distribute marijuana, that crime should be selling or distributing without a license. Another example is marijuana with relation to operating a vehicle. We would maintain Virginia's current DUI laws with regard to impairment, but increase our focus on training up drug recognition experts who can determine if a driver is impaired and if further testing is required. And again, looking at Colorado as a model of a state who has done this as well. We also have a provision which prohibits marijuana consumption by both drivers and passengers on public roads and highways while a car is being driven. And the bill prohibits the presence of open containers or partly consumed marijuana in the passenger area of a vehicle. So this brings me back to really the keystone principle of the bill, social equity, and one of its key tenets, expungement of prior criminal records. Excuse me. As I said before, the governor is proposing automatic expungement of most misdemeanor marijuana convictions, including for paraphernalia, beginning immediately when this bill becomes effective. And then for certain felony crimes, the bill outlines a petition process. So this is a key priority for the governor, and he included funding for expungement in general in his introduced budget to accomplish this goal. However, this is just one part of the bill's social equity commitment. We have two other really important social equity goals. The first is to create a licensing scheme that prioritizes equity and encourages participation in the cannabis industry by those people who have been harmed by the marijuana laws of the past. So we're creating a preference for social equity qualified applicants, and the bill defines who those people are. This would include things like reduced license and application fees and avoiding requirements in our application process that have disparate impacts on social equity applicants. We would create a new cannabis business diversity and equity support team to help these applicants go through the process to help them go through the application process, provide business planning and technical expertise, and then also low interest loans to provide capital to them.
Brad, I'm just
So
gonna,
we've been thoughtful about.
Brad, let me just pause for a moment to just say to the public, we are aware that you all have lost the screen and the slides that you may be speaking off of. But your presentation, the public should be able to access this presentation if they go to the Senate Rehab and Social Services website. We will make this presentation available if you go to the Rehab and Social Services link on LIS, and we apologize, we're working on a technical glitch right now, and we'll try to get the information up for you as soon as possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last piece of the social equity priorities that we have is the Cannabis Equity Reinvestment Fund, which will be overseen by a board of 20 members appointed by the governor, and it's going to receive 30% of the marijuana revenues. That board will administer the fund, which can go to scholarships, can award grants for workforce development, youth training, job training and placement, and reentry services in those communities who have been harmed, and then also contribute to Virginia's Indigent Defense Fund. And we know that each of these programs, those three, expungement, diverse participation in the industry, and community reinvestment, are important to create an equitable program, but we know that they're even more powerful working all together in concert to ensure that we're looking into the future with how we deal with these harms of the past. So once again, Madam Chair, on behalf of the governor and our entire team who have been working on this for the past few months, thank you for allowing us to present this morning. Thank you for all the work that you and several of the senators have already put into this. And we're really looking forward to the subcommittee meetings next week. I want to thank Senators Eben and Lucas for carrying this bill and for all their tireless efforts. And then we know that hundreds of people across the Commonwealth, thousands, have been working on this issue of marijuana legalization for a long time. And this bill didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's the result really of a multi-year effort that has culminated in a piece of legislation that we feel like our team feels like we can all be proud of. From that in-depth policy analysis that JLARC conducted, to all the community engaged public work group process that our team managed, we're really confident that Virginia has done the work ahead of time to ensure that we're legalizing marijuana in a very thoughtful and equitable way. So really appreciate your time this morning. We're happy to take any questions. We have some members of our team here, including ABC CEO Travis Hill, Assistant Secretary of Public Safety Jacqueline Catuan, Assistant Secretary of Health and Human Resources Katie Finley, and then also Deputy DEI Director Alacia Black-Hackett.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you for pulling together such a strong team on behalf of the governor and the bills that you've just spoken about. Colleagues, do you have any comments or questions? Senator Morrissey.
Good morning, Brad.
Good morning, Senator.
With regard to expungement, let's first be clear, there's no more talk about simply sealing people's records. It's a out and out expungement, correct?
That's correct, Senator.
Follow-up question.
Senator Morrissey.
With regard to expungement, some people have simple marijuana convictions on the record that date back, I could go back 50, 60 years. What is the effort? Can you summarize what the effort will be made to expunge their records? And as I understand from the bill, no proactive steps need to be taken by any individual to have their previous simple possession of marijuana conviction expunged.
Senator, I'm going to refer that question to Assistant Secretary Catuan to address that from Public Safety.
Thank you, Brad. Good morning, Madam Chair and Senator Morrissey. To answer your question, you are correct. This bill would not require anyone to take any proactive steps to get their records expunged for simple possession. That would happen automatically.
Okay, follow-up question.
Senator Morrissey.
All federal, state, local records showing a conviction for marijuana dating back as to the 60s will be erased. Is that correct?
The intention is to erase all of the records going back. However, I cannot speak for any federal crimes that may be included.
Okay. Final question, Madam Chair.
Senator Morrissey.
With regard to the Cannabis Reinvestment Fund, will that be administered similar to the Tobacco Commission Fund?
Senator Morrissey, Madam Chair, thank you for the question, Senator. I think that's obviously one model of a, we set up boards in state government all the time to administer funds, to award grants. And so I think we would be looking to appoint this board and set it up in a way that's going to establish a process to get these funds back out to communities in a way that this board feels is appropriate.
That may be, Brad, is that something that may be determined through a regulatory process? I'm asking.
Madam Chair, I think the way this is set up now is the bill sets up the board. There's not a regulatory process, to my understanding, that the board would need to go through, but I can work with council to see kind of how that board would be set up. But that's my understanding, is that board would be created. It has certain enumerated powers in the legislation, and it would be empowered to distribute those funds.
Okay, that's an important question. Any other questions, colleagues? Okay, well, we have a subcommittee set up. I'm sure you heard it announced, and we really appreciate the fact that the governor's team will be ready to provide technical assistance. This will be a very lively discussion in the committee, and I'm sure in the General Assembly. So thank you. I will ask David May, General Counsel, do we have anything else to come before this committee?
Madam Chair, I think that completes the docket.
I think I've exhausted everybody, but thank you for being here, colleagues. Our work is done. The committee rises this morning.